The chains of the Dominion. The galaxy was not free. For 10,000 years, the Dominion ruled across the stars, a vast empire of iron fleets and unyielding cruelty. World after world fell beneath their shadow, stripped of sovereignty and identity. Entire civilizations, brilliant in art, science, and spirit, were broken and reshaped into obedient husks. The Dominion enslaved billions, and to them, humanity was just another species to conquer. When the fleets came to Earth, their arrival was not with diplomacy, but with fire. Cities crumbled beneath orbital bombardments, oceans boiled from thermal strikes, and nations, once proud and divided, were flattened in a single night of terror. The survivors were herded into ships like cattle, scattered across prison worlds and labor colonies light years away. The Dominion believed it was finished. Humanity, they thought, had been silenced. But in the ashes of defeat, a spark remained. On Cartho 7, a Dominion mining colony on the edge of the Perseid Arm, human laborers worked beneath skies thick with ash. The ground was jagged and red, scarred by centuries of exploitation. Great machines clawed at the crust, tearing rare minerals from the rock, while overseers in gleaming armor barked orders and lashed the disobedient. Marcus Hale was just one among thousands. His back was bent from years of toil, his hands raw and scarred from the weight of mining tools. But his eyes, those stubborn, unbroken eyes, burned with something the Dominion could not erase. That day, as he hauled another car toward the smelters, he saw it again. A boy, no more than 12, beaten for stumbling under the weight of his load. The overseer raised his shock staff to strike again. The boy cried out, not in submission, but in fury. Marcus stepped forward. He should have stayed silent. Silence meant survival. Silence meant another day of breath, another chance at food, another night unbroken. Every lesson of the camps taught that resistance was pointless. Yet as the staff came down again, Marcus's arm shot out and caught it mid-swing. The crowd gasped. The overseer snarled, in that guttural Dominion tongue, "Slave, know your place." Marcus ripped the staff free, muscles screaming, and in one motion swung across the alien's helmeted head. The overseer staggered. The crowd froze. The boys stared in disbelief. Then Marcus spoke, not to the overseer, not even himself, but to everyone within earshot. "We are not slaves. Not now. Not ever." The words rippled like lightning. The overseer fell, blood dark against the dust. And in that single act, a myth was shattered. The Dominion's response was immediate. Soldiers poured into the mining pits, rifles charged, voices booming commands. The laborers scattered in fear, but not all. For the first time in years, Marcus saw something different in human eyes: defiance. They fought with picks, with rocks, with bare fists. They fought knowing they would die. And they did. Bodies fell, crushed by plasma fire. But others rose to take their place. The overseers had enslaved billions before, but never had they seen such ferocity. By the end of the riot, the pits were slick with blood. Marcus lay half buried in rubble, wounded and half conscious. But as he drifted into blackness, he remembered the boy's face, the way his eyes had lit up at the words. Not slaves. Never slaves. The Dominion tried to erase the incident. They executed dozens, scattered the rest to different camps, and buried Marcus's name in silence. To them, it was a minor rebellion, nothing more. But stories are harder to kill than men. On the prison world of Narth Prime, whispers spread of miner who stood against the lash. On the frozen labor camps of Idrith 9, humans passed the tale in hushed tones around fire pits. On the shipyards of Vera Station, enslaved mechanics painted a symbol on walls, a broken chain crudely carved. The Dominion saw only disorder, but to the slaves it was something more: a spark, a memory, a truth. Humanity had refused the chains. In the Dominion High Council, the governors laughed at the reports. "Another slave revolt," they said. "They will break, as they always do." They spoke of humanity as vermin, pests to be crushed under heel. But even as they dismissed it, the Empire trembled ever so slightly. For in the heart of their dominion, a new rhythm beat against their order, a rhythm of rebellion. And from the ashes of Carthos 7, a legend was born. For Marcus Hale, did not die in those mines. Broken, scarred, and hunted, he was smuggled out by fellow workers who refused to let him fall. He awoke days later in the caverns beneath the colony, surrounded by faces, human, alien, young, old, all staring at him with something he had not seen in years. Hope. And when he spoke again, his voice was ragged but unshaken. If they can enslave billions, then billions can rise. We will not kneel. We will not break. This I swear. The cavern echoed with cheers. In that moment, rebellion was no longer a dream. It was a promise. The Dominion had enslaved billions, but they had underestimated humanity. And for the first time in millennia, the chains began to crack. Sparks in the darkness. The Dominion thought it had ended the riot on Carthos 7. To them, it was nothing. Another flare of defiance crushed beneath armored boots. The overseers executed the rebels, scattered the survivors, and burned the mining pits to ash. The empire moved on. But history has a way of remembering what tyrants forget. The story of Marcus Hale spread through the labor colonies like wildfire, carried not by ships or broadcasts, but by whispers. In slave barracks and frozen mines, in deep space shipyards and prison bunkers, humans repeated the tale. A man who stood against the lash. A man who broke the overseer's staff and cried, "We are not slaves." Each retelling grew sharper, stronger, until Marcus became more than a man. He became a symbol. On the tundra world of Ida 9, where prisoners mined crystal fuel beneath skies that never thawed, a mechanic named Elena Voss knelt beside a shattered drilling rig. Her fingers were blackened from cold, her breath misting in the frigid air. Around her, guards barked orders and beat the slow. Elena whispered a man beside her, a scarred farmer dragged from Earth's fields long ago. "Have you heard?" she said softly. "On Carthos, one of ours killed a Dominion overseer. They say he shouted for freedom before they cut him down." The farmer looked at her with dull, broken eyes. "They cut them all down, girl." "Not all," Elena replied, her lips curling into a smile. "The story says he lives." The farmer turned back to his work, but something in his shoulders shifted, just slightly. Hope is a dangerous thing. To the Dominion, it was poison. To humanity, it was fire. Across the camps, scattered and broken survivors began to test their chains. A guard left beaten in an alley. A transport sabotaged before it reached orbit. A shipment of ore that vanished into the void. The Dominion dismissed it as inefficiency. But in truth, something greater was taking shape. Beneath the surface of Carthos 7, Marcus Hale stirred. He had not yet healed from his wounds, but he refused to remain idle. With a handful of loyal workers who had smuggled him into hiding, he began to plot, not survival, but resistance. Their meetings were quiet, hidden in caverns deep below the mining operations. Their weapons were pitiful. Sharpened tools, stolen shot batons, a handful of explosives cobbled together from mining charges. But Marcus knew something the Dominion did not. Weapons do not win wars. Well, does. "Listen to me," Marcus said one night, his voice hoarse but burning. The cavern was filled with shadows, dozens of men and women who had slipped away from the mines, desperate for more than survival. They've enslaved billions. And for millennia, no one has fought back. Why? Because they believe we're broken. They believe we will bow. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the crowd. Faces worn by hunger and exhaustion stare back, but their eyes glowed with something else. "But we don't bow. Not us. Not humans." A murmur of agreement swept the cavern. "They think the riot was over. They think I should be dead. Good. Let them believe it. Because tonight we take back what they stole." He unrolled a crude map, scratched into cloth. A smelter complex, heavily guarded, but vital. If it burned, Dominion production would falter, and the galaxy would know that the flames of rebellion had begun. The raid came 3 nights later. The rebels struck in silence, slipping through tunnels until they emerged in the heart of the smelter yards. Guards patrolled the platforms, their rifles gleaming under floodlights. The air stank of burning or molten metal pouring into great vats. Marcus raised his hand, signaling the strike. Explosives hidden in or carts detonated, fire ripping through the night. Smoke and sparks turned the sky crimson. Rebels surged from the shadows, striking with stolen weapons. For every Dominion soldier that fell, 2 rebels died. Plasma fire tore through unarmored bodies, screams echoing across the complex. Yet they did not stop. They climbed over barricades, hurled themselves into the flames, tore rifles from armored hands. And Marcus fought like a man possessed, a miner's hammer in one hand, a shock bat in the other. He cut a path through soldiers who had never before seen such fury from slaves. By dawn, the smelter burned, Dominion banners melted in the fire, and across the colony, every human slave saw the sky lit with rebellion. The cost was terrible. Half the rebels lay dead. The rest scattered into the wilderness, hunted like animals. But the message had been sent. From orbit, Dominion commanders watched the flames with growing unease. It was not the destruction of a single smelter that worried them. It was the realization that the slaves were not afraid anymore. On distant worlds, the whispers grew louder. On North Prime, slaves etched broken chains into the walls of their barracks. On Vera Station, mechanics sabotaged Dominion warships before they launched. On Idrith 9, Elena Voss smuggled blueprints of drilling rigs. Not to repair them, but to turn them into weapons. And for the first time, humans began to seek each other out across the stars. Hidden networks formed, trading information through smugglers, coded songs, even scratches carved into cargo crates. A rebellion was no longer a dream. It was becoming real. In the throne halls of the Dominion, the High Council raged. Primitive vermin, one governor spat. They believe themselves free? We will remind them what happens to those who resist. Armadas were dispatched. Colonies burned. Entire populations were slaughtered in reprisal. But the harder the Dominion struck, the faster the fire spread, because humanity had discovered the one weapon the Empire could not crush. Hope. Far beneath the surface of Carthos, 7, Marcus Hale stood before surviving rebels. His body was scarred, his clothes little more than rags, but his voice carried the weight of 1,000 chains breaking. They believe they've crushed us. They believe this fire will burn out. They're wrong. He raised a shard of broken chain, held high for all to see. This is no longer just about humans. This is about every slave they've ever taken. Billions bow under their heel. But tonight, the galaxy saw the truth. One chain can break, and when it breaks, the rest will follow. The cavern shook with voices, a roar rising into the night. And in that moment, the sparks became a fire. The Dominion had enslaved billions. But now, billions were watching, and humanity, scattered, wounded, hunted, was about to teach the galaxy what it meant to refuse the chains. Fire across the stars. The Dominion had ruled for millennia, unchallenged, unbroken. Empires rose and fell beneath its shadow, but the Dominion endured, crushing every spark of rebellion before it could catch flame. But this time, the spark refused to die. On the slave world of Vera Station, the Dominion's orbital shipyard stretched like a steel city around the gas giant below. Thousands of human slaves labored in silence, repairing starships that would never be theirs, welding armor for fleets that crushed their own people. That silence shattered the night a warship's reactor went critical. The blast tore through half the station, killing hundreds, but the survivors were not broken. They fled into stolen shuttles, scattering into the void with weapons, maps, and secrets. When Dominion patrols searched for them, they found nothing but a message scrawled in burning plasma across the wreckage. We do not serve. The whispers spread faster than Dominion fleets could chase them. On Idrith 9, Elena Voss organized escape tunnels beneath the frozen mines. She and her people stole drilling lasers and turned them into siege weapons. On North Prime, prisoners seized an armory, holding the garrison for 6 days before they were slaughtered to the last man. Their defiance was broadcast through hidden channels. Their final cries of humanity does not kneel, echoing across the camps. On forgotten asteroids, old smugglers ferried humans from one hidden colony to another, building networks the Dominion's intelligence could not follow. And always, in every story, one name was whispered: Marcus Hale. He had become more myth than man. Dominion governors swore he had been executed. Others claimed he'd been captured and hidden away. Yet the rebellion kept spreading, always carrying his banner of broken chains. The truth was far more dangerous. Marcus Hale was alive. Hidden deep in the mountains of Cartho 7, Marcus stood before a council of escaped leaders, miners, engineers, farmers, even children who had slipped through Dominion patrols. They gathered in caverns lit by stolen lanterns, a council of the enslaved. Marcus unrolled a map, rough and torn, but marked with routes, fleets, and supply lines. "The Dominion thinks this is chaos," he said, his voice low but iron. "They think these are isolated sparks. But sparks, when fed, become fire, and fire spreads." He pointed to the great smelter worlds, to the shipyards, to the slave camps scattered across 100 systems. "We cannot fight them ship for ship. Not yet. But we don't need fleets. We need shadows. We bleed them where they do not expect. We turn their weapons against them. We make them afraid of the dark." The council listened in silence, eyes gleaming. For the first time, the galaxy's scattered slaves saw not a rebellion, but a war. The first strike came weeks later. A Dominion convoy, its freighters heavy with ore and prisoners, passed through the asteroid belt of the Zyro system. The escorts moved lazily, confident that no slave fleet could ever threaten them. Then the rocks came alive. Engines flared, hidden ships bursting from the asteroids. Not Dominion warships, but stolen freighters, patched and scarred, their hulls painted with the symbol of broken chains. They struck with fury. Boarding hooks latched on escorts. Prisoners surged onto decks, shock batons, and mining drills clashing against rifles. Explosives gutted the freighters, freeing hundreds who had been bound for slave camps. By the time Dominion reinforcements arrived, the raiders were gone, leaving behind only wreckage and the mark humanity burned into the void. The galaxy took notice. For the first time in centuries, slaves of other species raised their heads. The Krathi, a reptilian race broken long ago, sabotaged Dominion refineries in honor of humanity's defiance. The Lidhari, a people reduced to living tools, whispered Marcus Hale's name in their stone prisons. Even the proud Kelnear, who once swore loyalty to the Empire, began to hesitate. The Dominion had enslaved billions. Now billions were watching the humans rise. The Empire struck back with fury. Armadas descended on rebel worlds, burning cities to glass. Entire populations were executed in retaliation. On Vera Station's ruins, the Dominion lined surviving slaves along the docking ring and vented them into space, leaving their bodies to drift as warnings. But instead of silence, the galaxy seethed. Every atrocity was fuel for the fire. Every act of cruelty spread faster than the Dominion's propaganda. Where once slaves kept their heads bowed, now they clenched their fists. Where once fear ruled, now rage grew. On Cartho 7, Marcus stood atop a ridge overlooking the burning horizon. Beside him, Elena Voss adjusted the crude rifle she had built from scrap and stolen parts. "They'll come for us harder now," she said. "They already have," Marcus replied, eyes fixed on the stars. "But every time they strike, they teach us their weakness." Elena frowned. "Weakness? They have fleets, armies, worlds." Marcus lifted a shard of broken chain from his belt, the same one he had carried since the riot. "They rule through fear. Take that away, and their fleets are nothing but metal, their armies nothing but men hiding behind orders. If billions refuse to kneel, what army could ever be large enough to stop them?" Elena said nothing, but she smiled. For the first time since her enslavement, she believed. Far across the galaxy, in the gilded halls of the Dominion throne, the High Council gathered in fury. These vermin spread rebellion like plague. One governor snarled. Entire sectors burned because of their whispers. Another spat venom. Crush them. Erase their worlds. Let none remain to speak their lies. But an older voice, deeper and colder, silenced them all. "They are not vermin," said High Regent Sither, his claws curling around the edge of the throne. "They are disease, and diseases spread if not cut from flesh." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with hate. "Find this Marcus Hale. Find the humans who dare defy us. And when you do, burn not only their bodies, but the very idea of their freedom." But it was already too late. Across the stars, fires burned. Convoys vanished. Garrisons fell. Banners of broken chains spread like constellations in the night sky. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion faced an enemy it could not crush with armies and fleets alone. For the first time, the galaxy whispered a word the Empire had long forgotten. Rebellion. The chains break. The Dominion's fleets darkened the stars. World after world burned beneath their vengeance, yet still the rebellion spread. The humans had become a symbol the Empire could not erase. Every execution only forged martyrs. Every massacre only sharpened rage. And now, for the first time in history, the Dominion faced not scattered slaves, but a war, the gathering of the broken. In a hidden system on the rim of the galaxy, hundreds of stolen ships drifted in silence. Not warships, not mighty armadas, but freighters, miners, or haulers, patched together with scrap and defiance. On the largest of them, the Liberty's Dawn, Marcus Hale stood before a council that stretched across species, languages, and scars. Humans, Krathi, Lidhari, Kalan deserters, all once broken, now united. Marcus's voice carried through the hall, steady as steel. "We cannot fight them world for world," he said. "We cannot match their fleets. But today we don't need to. Today we strike at their heart." He unrolled a star map, glowing red with a target no slave had ever dared dream of touching. The throne world, Karathos Prime. Gasps rippled through the room. To even speak the name was heresy. Marcus let them settle, then continued. They believe fear will always protect them, that no one would dare touch their throne. That belief is their greatest armor. So we break it. He pointed to the orbital foundries above Karathos, where fleets were birthed in fire. We hit the shipyards. Not to win, not to destroy them all, but to show the galaxy they can bleed, to prove the Empire is not immortal. Silence. Then Elena Voss, her rifle slung across her back, stepped forward. Then we don't fight for survival anymore, she said. We fight to live free or die free. A murmur spread, and then one by one, voices rose, different tongues, different species, but the same word echoing together. Freedom. Fire on the throne world. The assault came with no warning. The Dominion shipyards glittered above Karathos Prime, titanic rings spanning continents. Warships larger than cities drifted within, guarded by entire fleets. They were ready for war. But not for this. The rebel flotilla erupted from hyperspace in a blaze of engines, a storm of ragged ships diving straight into the jaws of the Empire. Alarms blared. Dominion commanders sneered. Scrap freighters? Miners' barges? Endless farce. But when the first wave struck, the Dominion realized this was no farce. Freighters rammed into destroyers, detonating with stolen reactor cores. Miner ships drilled through cruiser hulls, carving steel with the same tools once used in slave pits. Boarding pods slammed into carriers, spilling humans and Lidhari fighters onto decks, wielding weapons cobbled from chains and scrap. The void lit up with fire. The Predator strikes. At the heart of the chaos, one ship drove deeper, an old Dominion frigate, scarred and rebuilt by human hands. Marcus Hale stood on its bridge, eyes locked on the throne world below. "Punch us through," he ordered. The Defiance surged forward, weaving between battleships that dwarfed it. Enemy fire raked across its hull, tearing armor away, but it pressed on. Elena's voice rang over comms. "Charges set. If we die, we take their yards with us." Marcus gripped the edge of the console. He had no illusions. Most of them would not survive. But survival had never been the goal. The goal was to make the galaxy see. The spark becomes fire. Across Karathos, the impossible unfolded. Slave crews aboard Dominion ships mutinied, turning their guns on their masters. Krathi chained to factories rioted, storming garrisons with stolen cutters. Lidhari miners collapsed the tunnels of their prisons, burying Dominion overseers alive. The Empire's heart, once untouchable, burned with revolt. The message spread across hidden channels, smuggled frequencies, desperate transmissions carried on dying ships. The throne burns. The Dominion bleeds. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire knew fear. The last stand. The Defiance reached the central shipyard. Dominion dreadnoughts closed in, weapons blazing. Marcus turned his crew, battered and bloodied. "This is where we end," he said. "But this is also where they begin." He lifted the shard of broken chain from his belt, holding it high. "No more slaves. No more fear. Today we break their chains." The crew roared, voices raw, and hurled the Defiance straight into the shipyard's core. The explosion ripped through the orbital ring, tearing half the yards apart in a storm of fire and metal. Entire fleets under construction were reduced to burning wreckage. The blast was seen from the surface of Karathos itself. Billions of slaves looked up at the sky and saw the impossible. The throne world bleeding. Epilogue. The dawn. The Defiance was gone. Marcus Hale, Elena Voss, and their crew perished in fire. But their sacrifice shattered the illusion of Dominion invincibility. Across the galaxy, rebellions ignited, fleets deserted. Species long broken rose up. The Dominion still had armies, still had fleets. But no matter how many they crushed, more rose. Because Marcus Hale had proven the truth. Chains can be broken. And once broken, they can never be reforged. In the ruins of Karathos, as the fires burned, slaves raised their fists to the sky and shouted the words that would echo across the stars for generations. "We do not serve.